Welcome to Classic Trials. If you're new here, my name is Alita. I'm a lawyer licensed in California and DC, and on this channel, we make sense of the law one bite at a time. In this series, we observe and analyze the play-by-play of some of the biggest trials that have shaped the public consciousness of the American judicial system. In this season, we're working our way through the case of California v. Erik and Lyle Menendez. Growing up in Princeton, New Jersey, and then Beverly Hills, California, these young men had everything they could ever want, or so it seemed, until one night on August 20th, 1989, they approached Jose and Kitty Menendez with newly purchased shotguns. Put on trial for murdering their own parents, they claimed self-defense, arguing they were terrorized in their own home by abusive parents until they could take no more. Which argument is more convincing? Come join and see for yourself. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're coming from. I hope you're having a great day, great Monday. I am joining you from a new location. If you didn't see my last upload on the channel the other day, hang on, I still have more animals with me, but this here is Fitzy. He's a hardy imposter. If you have been watching Lawyers and Dragons, this is my parents' cat. One of their cats anyway. He's a wonderful cat and a little bit of a home stand-in for right now while we are on vacation. So yes, I am at my parents' house in California and just having a good Christmas so far. All right, I know this is the thing that everyone has been talking about, is the settlement between Amber Heard and Johnny Depp. The reporting on it so far has been Amber Heard settles her defamation case with Johnny Depp. We'll talk about it. Not in this stream. This is going to be we're focusing on classic trials here, but I will let you guys know that we will be talking about it later today on another stream. It's one of those that we've got to, right? We've got to jump on this even when we're on vacation. So, other than that, for the rest of the week, I anticipate, unless something else big happens, right? I anticipate that we'll have a relatively quiet week for the rest of the week, given that at the end of this week is Christmas. So just having some family time and whatnot. So okay, let's see here. Let's say hi to some folks in the chat here. Let's see what do we got here. I want to make sure that I've got everybody here. Okay, let's see here. We've got Anna Costello, hi from Pennsylvania. Just at freezing, I checked. Not too bad, no snow. All right. Not too bad, right? Brittany Chanel says good morning from a cold and snowy Illinois. Jessica Crago says good morning from Tennessee. I am finally finished, and I'm so sorry. That was neither an earthquake nor a pet. That was my foot. Good morning from Tennessee. I am finally finished with my second master's degree, this one in legal studies. Now I just have to figure out what I can do career-wise. That's always a struggle, isn't it? But congratulations on your second master's degree. I hope you're able to find some kind of a use for it, for sure. Let's see. Kristen Perry says good morning from Chile, Texas. Mew0203. Good evening, all from Tokyo. It's 2 a.m. here. Oh my goodness. Well, I guess technically good morning, right? Finally caught up to the latest episode and can watch live. Yay. Very, very happy to have you here. It's been a fascinating ride, hasn't it? It's been pretty crazy. Melissa Simax says, what a day in LawTube. Morning from West Hollywood. I know, right? It's crazy. It's crazy. We're going to go, like I said, we're going to go over all of that. Aaron Morgan says, hello, everyone. Hello from UK. Got my cup of tea, doggos fed, and ready to go. All right. Living life with and singing songs with Mallory says, hello from cold Utah once again. I look forward to these live streams. Once again, I have something to do, so I will watch what I can and the whole thing on rewatch. Keep up the good work. Love it. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. Very, very kind of you. And let's see, I think we've got some more since I went through those. We've got Hezo1, good morning, all from Alberta, Canada, where the air hurts my face. Oh God, that sounds awful. Bronwyn W, good morning from Utah. Only 6 more days till Christmas. I know, it's exciting, right? We've got some nice comments about Fitzy here. Yeah, he is a beautiful cat. He's a beautiful cat, and he's pretty social too. Hey, buddy, you want to come up here? He's by my feet right now. Come on, jump up. Don't just bite the chair. Jump up. Okay, never mind then. Okay, let's see here. Melissa Simok, what a day! Oh, I already got that one. What a day, right? What a day. Let's see here. Got more here. Sokotoa, also hello from Cali. Hey, Sokotoa. Jessica B says, good morning. I'm in chilly Northern Illinois, staying warm at work. Yes. Oh, stay warm, stay warm, stay warm for sure. Yeah, Illinois can get super cold. I've been there around Christmas and New Year's before, and it is and it is definitely cold. Otterly Bell, good evening, Alita and chat from a chilly Sweden. Oof, yes, I can imagine it probably gets very cold there too. I've not yet been to Sweden, but one of these days I'd like to go. Robbie Dobby, hello everyone. Not a bad day here in Nova Scotia, but we are expecting more rain. Cheerful Bacon, morning all from a blustery, snowy Blaine, Washington. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Gina D. Hi, Alita. Early Merry Christmas to you from Boca Raton, Florida. Wonderful. Thank you so much. And a Merry early Christmas to you as well. Oh, right. And I think that might be about it. And yes, Rachel Mills, I did see this also over the weekend. Megan Thee Stallion, she's in trial right now in a case between her and Tory Haynes, I think is how you pronounce it. I'm so sorry. I'm not familiar with him, but I've only seen his name written, so I probably should watch some YouTube videos about it so I can make sure that it's Haynes and not like Hannes. Anyway, I'm pretty sure it's Haynes. This is me putting on my nerd glasses here, right? But apparently her bodyguard was supposed to testify in this case, which involves a shooting, right? So it's like pretty serious case. And apparently he has gone missing, and even his attorney hasn't heard from him since Thursday. So there's not showing up for trial and just kind of saying, sorry, I'm not gonna go as a witness. And then there's going missing. So concerning, it's one of those things that I'm looking at perhaps talking about this case, but if I don't know, I mean, I'm also very much trying to intentionally take time away and just sort of spend time with family and whatnot also. So because it's, you know, when you're living on the other side of the world, it's nice to just be able to like slow down and spend some intentional time with family and whatnot, and friends as well. Anyway, so okay, Brittany Chanel, thank you so much. Tory Lanes pronunciation Lanes. Okay, so that was my instinct, but I wasn't sure if that was correct. But thank you for that. Okay. Let's see. Unless I also, although now that I think about it, I may have even pronounced it something differently. Maybe I didn't say lanes. Maybe I said like Yanes or something. I don't know. Who knows? You're watching this. I don't pay that much attention to when I say these kinds of things sometimes. Okay. Anyway, we don't need to get further into that. Joining us today, supposed to be at some point, hopefully, will be Natalie Wisco. She said that she's actually able to take a little bit of time today. So I don't know exactly what time she'll be able to hop in for or for how long. But she did say that she's looking forward to jumping in with us. So that will be that'll be great if she's able to, and hopefully nothing has come up also. But otherwise, so getting back to the actual it's another Menendez Monday. We've got the Menendez trial today. So we've got more testimony. I believe this is more computer testimony. Last week we looked at primarily testimony by the computer guy and his pregnant wife, right? Like she was pregnant at the time that they were there at the Menendez house looking into this computer, um and trying to figure out if there was this will. I was a little confused on the computer stuff. Luckily, Kurt came on and was able to kind of clarify some things. Him and his computer science degree and all of his patents experience, he was able to explain to someone like me who is not very well versed in computers, to explain how something can go missing and how you can tell that something has gone missing on a computer. And so that was very helpful. But now we've got another witness who's going to be testifying. I was considering drawing it out for a second witness, at least a little bit of the testimony. But the witness after this next one is Dr. Erwin Golden. He's the deputy medical examiner for the LA County coroner. And I haven't actually looked at the testimony itself, but when I was kind of scrolling through for timestamps and whatnot to see how long it would be, I could see that the testimony gets very graphic. So I have to figure out what I'm going to do, because they show photos from like the medical examination table, which is like, it's what you see when you go to an autopsy. And so it's very, very graphic. I would anticipate that I mean, demonetization is one thing. This could, I don't know. So I want to be careful. Maybe pre-record and like blur things out, censor things. I don't know. So I'm gonna limit it to just the one witness today, which there's plenty of testimony from him from what it looks like. And yeah, so we'll go from there. But so like I said, this week, this is what we've got today. We've got classic trials. At some point later today, I will also be talking about the Depp v. Heard settlement that happened. And then the rest of the week is basically mostly going to be off from what I'm planning, at least. And then after that, next Monday, no classic trials, because I will be traveling. I'll be flying. So it'll be not until the following week. But next week, there will be more content and stuff like that as well. So, okay. I'm going to spill coffee on myself here. Okay. Anyway, let's get to it, shall we? All right. Oh yeah. And yeah, so for Depp v. Heard, I'm planning on just jumping onto a live stream to talk about it. Maybe see if some friends want to jump on as well. So we'll see. But yeah, I'm planning on a live stream. Maybe I'll do a VOD as well later on, just for people that don't have time to sit for a very long period of time. I don't know. We'll see. Okay. Let's get to it, shall we? Okay. All right. So, okay, let's get started.
Will or did not erase the computer, that there would be no argument that those events did not happen.
That's correct.
Right. So that's how I propose to proceed at this point, just to get as much information from Mr. Witkin as will be brought out during the direct and cross before the Lyle Menendez jury. I don't notice counsel for Lyle Menendez here. I assume they are. And so what I'm going to do is excuse let me ask how long do you think it'll take for the testimony of Mr. Witkin before some matters that relate to Lyle Menendez. Good morning to you all.
All right, so now the jury's back.
And welcome back. Let me ask, before we get started here, question that I've been asking and will be asking throughout the trial, and that relates to whether any of you have seen or heard anything about this case in any source or from anybody or from in any way other than what's going on here in the courtroom. If anybody has, whether it's been in discussions with anyone else or hearing someone talk about it or seeing news coverage, television coverage in any way, or anything, newspapers, anything, would you raise your hand? All right, nobody has. Okay, we'll now proceed with the testimony of the next witness. You may call that witness to the witness stand, please.
People call Howard Witkin to the stand, please.
My name is Howard Brian Witkin.
Howard Witkin.
Witkin.
Mr. Witkin, what do you do for a living, please?
I'm a computer consultant.
And what does a computer consultant do?
My company provides emergency response service and support for people with computer systems. People call us up and we'll go and solve problems for them. We'll install systems, fix systems, repair systems, sell them, advise them what they should or shouldn't buy.
Do you own a company called Leviathan Development?
Yes, I do. I have partners, but I'm president and one of the principal stockholders.
And is Leviathan Development located in what part of the city, please?
We're in West Los Angeles.
And what kind of training do you have in computers?
About 10 years of having worked on them in the field. I have a bachelor's degree in applied mathematics with a specialization in computability in computers from UCLA. And then I've been providing network service and support since 1984.
Now, when we're talking about computers, do you specialize in just the IBM type of computer, or Apple as well?
Primarily IBM type computers, IBM compatibles.
On August the 31st of 1989, about 1:30 in the afternoon, were you inside of your car in the city of Beverly Hills?
Yes, I was.
And did you get a phone call in your car asking you to go somewhere?
Yeah, I received a page from my office. I called the office and spoke to my dispatcher, and he said that he'd received an emergency call from a gentleman in Beverly Hills who needed to have some files recovered off of a computer system. It needed to be done that afternoon as he was leaving on a flight for the East Coast in a few hours. And since I was 3 or 4 blocks away, could I take that call?
And what did you do?
So I took the phone number, wrote down the name and the number. I wrote down it was a Lyle Menendez. I wrote the name down incorrectly. Called him on my car phone, told him that I was a few blocks away and would be over in a few minutes, and proceeded to, I believe the address was 722 North L. Proceeded to their home.
And did you park on the street?
Parked on the street, across the street, directly across from the house.
Okay. Did you have any difficulty in getting admitted to the house?
When I got out of my car and walked up to the home, it was a series of locked gates with armed security guards, like Bel Air patrol type guards. When I walked up to the gate, they asked me who I was. I told them that I was Howard Witkin. I was there to see Lyle Menendez. He corrected me, said it was Menendez, and told me to wait a second. He would go get him.
And did, in fact, he go and get Lyle Menendez?
And so he went into the house, and a moment later, Lyle came out of the house. They let me in the gate. He escorted me into the home.
Okay. Do you see Mr. Lyle Menendez in court here today, please?
Yes, I do.
And what color top is he wearing?
Kind of greenish, grayish. I don't know. What color is it?
And
It's this gentleman here.
He's referring to the defendant at counsel table, Lyle Menendez.
Thank you. Once you gained entry into the house, where did you go?
Lyle escorted me upstairs into a bedroom and showed me the computer, which was an IBM XT computer, immediately to the right of the door. He stepped in the door, and to your right in the corner was the computer.
When you say it's an IBM XT, that means the manufacturer of the computer was an IBM?
The manufacturer of the computer was an IBM, and it was an older model of computer.
Your Honor, I have here an exhibit which has been marked as Exhibit 63. May I touch the witness, please?
Yes.
Mr. Witkin, I'm showing you a photograph, and I'd like to ask you if you recognize the room which is depicted in the photograph.
Yes, I do.
Do you see a computer in that photograph?
Yeah, this is the room that I came into, and this is the computer off in the corner. And you can tell it's an XT by the fact that the front of the computer is black disk drives instead of gray disk drives.
Okay, but the disk drive, do you mean the entry for where you put
Where you put the little floppy disks. So that is the computer that I worked on.
All right, now, Mr. Witkin, before you began to work on a computer, did someone ask you to do something with the computer?
Yeah, when I arrived, is when we walked upstairs, I asked Lyle what it was that he needed me to do, what he was trying to accomplish. And what he told me is that he had a series of files that he desperately needed to recover, that they had been erased or damaged, and he needed those files, and could I please try to find them on the computer for him.
Did he identify the names of the files?
Yeah, as I remember it was 4 names: Lyle, Erik, Will, and Menendez.
Shireen, he does have a relatively
Now,
plain tie.
For
of the
those
90s.
of us here who are not very computer literate, could you give us a very basic rundown of what a file is inside of a computer?
Yeah, when you work on a computer, when you run like a program like a word processor, like WordPerfect, or a spreadsheet like Lotus, The information that you create, you sit at the keyboard and you type in, let's say you want to write a letter to a friend. So you sit at the keyboard like a typewriter and you type the letter, and it will save it on the computer's hard disk in a file with a name. So when you're done, you say, I want to save this file. I want to save my work that I've done. It will ask you for a name, and you'll say Lyle or Eric, whatever you want to name the file. Hit a key, and it will save it on the hard disk so that you have a semi-permanent magnetic record of that information.
Now, what is a hard disk?
A hard disk is a device. It's a component in a computer that allows for permanent storage or semi-permanent storage of information. There's two ways that a computer can store information. One is called RAM, which is electronic memory, and it's only usable when the computer is turned on. So like when you're working on your program, while you're typing it, it keeps it in RAM. It keeps it in the power on memory. But if you want to keep it till the next day, you want to have something that will keep it when you turn the computer off, when you turn the power off. So they've created something that's magnetic, which is a floppy disk or a hard disk, which will store the information in a more permanent fashion. So I can turn the computer off and it will hold the information until the next time I turn it on.
Did you, in fact, attempt to access the hard disk of the computer, which is shown in Exhibit 63?
Yes, I did.
And how did you do that?
Once he gave me the names of the files that he wanted to find, the first thing I did is I sat down and I typed a directory. The way a computer stores information on a hard disk is it keeps a list of files. As if you were keeping a file drawer, you would have each file folder and you'd write the name of a file and store it. So what I did is I sat down at the computer and first looked, the simplest way was just to look and see the names of every file on the hard disk. And there's a little software program you can run that will show you every single file anywhere on the hard disk and show you the name of the file. Because the simplest way people lose files is they just misplace them. They move them to a different list, they put it in the wrong drawer, so to speak. So the first thing I did was look to see whether the file existed.
All right, now you said something about you had a program to look to see what was on the hard disk. Is that correct?
Yeah, the first tool I believe I used was Xtree. First I used just the standard DOS, the standard operating system.
Now,
Right,
okay, you're starting to talk computerese, all right? Could you explain what DOS is?
All right, DOS is the basic, it's the very elementary program that tells a computer how to act like a computer. One of the wonderful things about a computer is you can make it do anything. I mean, I can use a computer as an imitation airplane, so I can sit and look at a screen and play. I can use it as a game. I can use it to write letters. You can basically do anything with it. The thing that tells the computer how to be an IBM computer is something called a disk operating system, DOS. And it's the very, very basic program. There's a certain set of commands or things you can tell it to do. One of which is something called dir, D-I-R, which says, give me a list of every file.
Okay, now, if a file has been deleted from the directory, is there a way to see if it's still stored inside of the computer?
Yeah, in fact, the way DOS deletes a file. So for example, when I create a file, it writes it magnetically onto the hard disk. So now the information is stored as a series of ones and zeros on a hard disk. And then it has another place, which is this index, the list of what's there. When I delete a file, it doesn't actually touch the data. When I say delete or erase a file, it leaves the information on the disk. It just goes to the list and changes the name of the file in the index to like a question mark. So for example, if you have, take a telephone book, the yellow pages. If I want to hide your information, or if I want to erase your information, I don't have to actually take the information out. If I just change the first letter of your name to a question mark, it makes it very difficult to find it again.
All right, so let me stop you for a second. Then if you had deleted the file from the directory, okay, the directory is what you turn on the computer, you write dir, and it will
show you a list of what's on the computer.
If I delete a file, when I turn the directory on, the name won't be on there anymore.
Right, the file will be on the disk, but the name won't appear on the directory.
Okay. So is there a way by which you can go into the hard drive and ask it to give you all the files that have been deleted before?
Right, so there's a tool called Norton Utilities that I used.
Norton, is that spelled N-O-R-T-O-N?
N-O-R-T-O-N, Utilities.
Is that a program?
That is a program.
Now, in relationship to the 4 items that you were asked to look for, did you look for them in the directory?
First, I looked for them in the directory.
Did you find them in the directory?
I found a couple of the names of the file. Like I found a file called Menendez as an example. But when I looked at the actual file, What the file contained was a printout of the directory that someone or somehow had managed to already erase the file, but not by telling it, please erase me, by copying something else over the top of it
Now, you said you found the word Menendez in the directory.
as a file name.
Okay, did you find any other file names in the directory?
I also believe I found Will, Erik, and Lyle.
Now, Mr. Witkin, when you were told the word Will, W-I-L-L, did you consider that to be an abbreviation for the name William, or did you understand it to be the name of a document, or what was in your mind?
As I understood it, it was 3 first names, 3 proper names and 1 last name.
Like Larry, Moe, and Curly Joe.
Right, but
Okay.
as Lyle, Erik, and short Lyle, who I knew there existed a human being named Lyle because I was standing there talking to him. Erik, which I assumed was another male first name, and Will, which I assumed was short for William.
Now, you've testified that you found something in the file called Menendez, but it was basically just...
Right, each of the files, what I found was each of the files that I did find had no meaningful information. What they each of them was an exact copy of the other, and what they contained was a listing of the actual directory, as if someone had copied the directory over those files. If you recall, I said when you delete a file, it doesn't actually take the information off. It just changes the name. The one way you can get the information off is write something else right over the top of it.
Now,
So apparently someone had written over the top trying to obscure these 3 files, or either purposefully or accidentally, but someone had actively covered those files with.
All right. Now, is one of the things you're asked to do in your profession to go and correct mistakes that people make on their computers?
One of the most common things you do.
All right.
I mean, a major piece. In fact, this tool, Norton Utilities, Peter Norton, who originally created it, managed to build a multi-million-dollar company out of one product, out of an unerased product, a product essentially for just taking when someone else accidentally erases a file and recover it.
All
So
right.
it's a very, very common thing to want to do.
After you located these various files and found that there was no meaningful information inside, did you communicate that fact to Lyle Menendez?
Yeah, I did. The first thing I did is once I realized that they had nothing meaningful, the next step that I took, I told them that there was nothing in the files, but there was a tool I could use, again, a piece of Norton Utilities, to search through the whole disk, ignoring files, but just looking at every letter on the disk and trying to find those names to see if they existed someplace else, either in a different file name or if in a file that had been erased and just was still where the raw information was there but no longer attached to a file.
Okay. Did you ask him if you should do that, or did you tell him you were going to do that?
I told him I was going to do that.
Okay. Now, during the period of time that you were making your search, where was Lyle Menendez?
Coming in and out of the room. When I began, he stood behind me and stood with me. He left the room, came back in several times. A couple of times he was in the room with me, made a phone call and walked back and forth. He was arranging a dinner date or a dinner appointment for that afternoon and arranging a flight back to, or discussing a flight back to New Jersey. But he was with me, watching what I was doing, would leave, come back and watch again what I was doing.
And Mr. Witkin, did you in fact then use the portion of Norton Utilities to search the hard disk to see if you could find any other words or references to the items you've been asked to look
Right,
for?
so I searched the complete hard disk everywhere and found that those files, the words existed no place else on the hard disk except as those 3 file names containing essentially meaningless information. And I told Lyle this, that unfortunately I had failed and was unable to recover any useful or meaningful data for him.
What did he reply to you after you told him that?
What he told me is that was very good, because in fact he didn't want to recover the information. He wanted to make sure that the information was not in fact there and couldn't be recovered even by someone who was actively trying to recover the information.
Now, were you actively trying to recover the information?
It's doing my best.
And about how much time do you think you spent doing that?
20 minutes to half an hour.
All right, after Lyle Menendez told you what you just related to us, what happened then?
I told him I'd been unable to recover it, and then he asked, could I erase it to make sure that even if I hadn't been good enough at recovering it, maybe someone else could. Was there a way I could erase the information to guarantee that it could never be recovered?
Did he tell you why he wanted that done?
He told me that the computer actually contained personal financial information, that they were selling the computer, and the information on the machine was confidential. They did not want it released or anyone else seeing it, which again is a common thing to do. If you have a computer and you want to give it to someone else and you have confidential information, there's a tool for erasing it. Again, part of Norton Utilities.
All right. Did you in fact erase the computer?
It's funny because nowadays it's like you trade in your MacBook for a new MacBook. Like that's just so common, right? They automatically wipe the computer and make sure that there's nothing on there. Um, and that's obviously not unique to Apple. It's pretty much every single computer that like, they're so commonplace now that's such a generic kind of experience. It is interesting to me that he thought that the word will was a name as opposed to a document. Anyway, so far pretty interesting here. And I see folks in the chat commenting about um how it's interesting how this would have been completely over the head of all these people, how they have to compare these files in a computer to files in a filing cabinet because so many people just couldn't quite grasp the concept of like this data being electronically stored. I will say I still can be a little bit of a boomer when it comes to technology. So for me, it's not, I don't quite giggle as much as other people do. I guess, you know what Aaron Murphy was saying here. Let's see if I could find find this this right here. Isn't it crazy how over the head this testimony would have been to the vast majority at the time? Now we giggle. But yeah, it is, it is interesting to see how you know you can just find this information anywhere on the internet. And for them it's like, understanding how a computer works. It really took a lot for folks back then.
Computer at that point.
So I then used, the Norton Utilities has a file called wipe disk, which will go, and I said, the only true way to erase a file is to write something else over it. So what wipe disk does is it goes to the whole hard disk, and every single character, every possible place to put a piece of information, it writes a 1 and then a 0 and then a 1, and it forces it so that there is no way to ever see what was on that disk beforehand.
So Norton Utilities uses a method of doing 1, 0.
What it does is information on a computer is stored as either a 1 or a 0, either an on switch or an off switch. So the way you can erase something is you write something else over it.
Is it common in the field of people who understand computers that if you saw a computer that had 1s and 0s all through it, that you would think the Norton Utilities wipe disk had been used?
You can generally tell when you search. If you go and search if you look at the disk outside of the files, the pieces of the disk that should be random information, because until you write a file, it's random what's out there. So if you looked at the places that should be random and saw that they were all 1s or all 0s, it's clear that someone had been there and used this wipe disk tool.
Now, I believe that when you were explaining your basic course on computers to us, you referred to floppy disks. Is that correct?
Right.
Did you see any floppy disks there when?
Yeah, there was on the desk, there were several other boxes of floppy disks. And in fact, the next question that I was asked was, first I was asked, could you recover? When I said it was impossible to recover, I was asked, can you make sure that it's really impossible to recover? When I did that, the next question that I was asked is, can you make it look as if you were never here? Can you restore the files so that it would not be clear to someone that the disk had been erased?
And who said that to you?
Lyle asked me to do that. He asked me,
Yeah.
could you erase it? Could you make it look as if no one had erased anything on here?
During the period of time that you were working in the bedroom on the computer, aside from Lyle.
So this is, I'd say this is pretty damaging for the Menendez brothers, because this definitely makes it look like they're saying, hey, there's a will on here. It cuts us out. We don't want it. Make sure that not only does it no longer exist, but also that it you get rid of all the fingerprints here, essentially, right? And that does kind of play into this idea. Well, maybe it might play into the idea that they did this for the money, right? Or perhaps it could be that they still killed their parents because of of the emotional traumatic reasons, that the defense wants us to believe. And then at the same time they say, well, we've still got to take care of ourselves. Like we still have to make sure that that we're not cut out of this crap from our abusive parents who are continuing to abuse us via this will this will device, right? This testamentary device. I don't know. I mean, this is not necessarily my opinion, but I'm just saying, someone could follow that sort of line of reasoning in watching this, but it doesn't exactly look good that they are trying to go down the path of really covering up tracks like this.
Lyle Menendez, did anyone else ever come in the room?
No.
Were you able to make it look like you were never there?
Apparently not perfectly, but what I did is I took the diskettes that contained copies of the original programs that had been on the computer and reloaded those programs, recreated files, so that if you just picked up the computer and looked at the computer, you would see a computer with a series of programs loaded on it and have no reason to suspect that it had ever been formatted or erased or unerased or anything.
So the floppy disks that you saw and used were disks of various programs that one uses in running a computer. Is that
Right.
correct?
They were in fact copies of the programs that had been on the computer before I did the wipe disk. Because once you do the wipe disk, it not only erases files, it erases every program, erases everything off of the hard disk. So I put those programs back on the hard disk.
So for instance, if I had Windows inside of my computer and you did the wipe disk and wiped out the computer, then I'd have to reinstall Windows. Is
Right.
that correct?
Right.
Okay. How long were you there? Do you remember?
Again, about 20 minutes to half an hour.
The entire time?
Yeah, it's not a very lengthy process.
At some point, did you write a receipt for your services, sir?
I did.
Your Honor, I have here an original receipt and also a blow-up copy of it. They'd have to be marked as, you want me to mark them as 64 and 64 duplicate? Add the original and also a blow-up.
You have one blow up and one original, is that it?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, well, no, make the original 64 and a blow up 65.
Thank you, Your Honor. May I approach, please, Your Honor?
Yes.
Mr. Witkin, I'm going to show you Exhibit 64 and also the blow-up of it. Is this the actual receipt that you left that day after performing the services you described?
Yes, it is.
And this appears to be a Xerox copy of it. Now, the receipt indicates the date of the 31st of August of 1989.
Yes, it does.
And was that, in fact, the date that you were at the home?
Yes, it was.
Look at all that detail on that blow up. This is something that is a little bit frustrating throughout this entire trial, is the fact that we can't see in any amount of detail any of these documents that are shared that are blow ups. But I mean, I would imagine that this is probably the biggest that they could get them made from a place like Kinko's or something like that. But it's just not good enough, right? This is one of those things that I am very happy that we have the technology that we have, so we can actually see the exhibits that are shown in court.
And do you remember where it was you left the receipt when you left the house that day?
If you look at the picture, just in front of the computer is a television set with a VCR on it. I left it on top of that TV and VCR.
Were you paid for your services that day?
Yes, Lyle wrote me a check.
And was that done in your presence?
It was done in my presence. He wrote it to cash in the amount of $150.
Your Honor, I have here a check to cash. It's check number 145. May this be marked as People's
66.
66, please. And I also have a blow up of that. May that be marked as 67, please?
Yes.
And really quick, a couple super chats from my brother. Thanks, Andy. Thanks so much for the super chat. Says, by the way, stargazing was fun last night. The kids loved seeing Jupiter and Saturn on the telescope. And what would stargazing be without me making jokes about Uranus? Thanks, Andy. Thank you. Yeah, for everyone else in the chat, because no one else knows about this. Mr. Bites bought a telescope this week, or just yesterday, day before yesterday, something like that. He is very, very, very excited. So yesterday we finally had a clear night, and we were able to check out some of the planets that we could see. So we were actually able to see the rings around Saturn. Really cool. And also like the stripes on Jupiter. So cool. Anyway, and to answer your question, Love Dreaming Peach, yes, Andy is unfortunately, unfortunately, my real brother. He is one of these days he'll be able to actually make it onto one of my live streams. I know that he always he wants to come on, but he always complains about the fact that I'm streaming during the workday. So that's just, it's sorry, brother. I'll bring him on again at some point. And also thank you so much to Sandra Ramirez once again gifting 20 Legalbytes memberships. Holy cow, you are always so kind and so generous. You're always gifting these memberships to folks. Thank you so much. So kind of you. And to everyone else that is now a member of Bite Club, welcome to Bite Club. And I hope you enjoy it. We are not going to be doing a Bite Club live stream this Friday. At least I don't anticipate it. So normally we do Friday casual Bite Club stream where we just kind of hang out in the chat and talk about literally anything. You guys can ask me anything, and basically ask me anything. There's a question and answer format that we like to do as well. And we'll talk about just about anything. So, but this week, because it's Christmas weekend, we are not going to do it this Friday. But the next Friday for sure. And I'll try to make up for it. I'll try to do something to make up for it also. But let's see here. Otherwise, but thank you so much, Sandra, once again. And just a note here also, while we're on the subject, that membership through YouTube members, YouTube memberships through locals, supporters on locals, supporters on Patreon, you guys really help to keep this channel moving forward, because we don't always talk about subjects that are YouTube ad friendly. So we'll have videos and live streams that will totally get demonetized because we're talking about subjects that are important, but YouTube has determined that they are not ad friendly. So on those, I might put a ton of time and effort into a video, and then it gets like no ads. So being able to dedicate a lot of time and resources onto this channel and onto the subjects that we talk about is really important to me, right? And so I know that there are so many viewers that really like the content on this channel, as well as other channels around LawTube, of course, as well. So that kind of support is really helpful, that I can just say, you know what, so this video doesn't get monetized, who cares? Like I've still got, plenty that I can put resources into this video, with editing and graphics and all this kind of stuff, and paying for legal research and all this kind of stuff, also. So yeah, anyway, so thank you to Sandra, thank you to everyone that is a member of Bite Club, whether through YouTube memberships or Patreon or locals. I really appreciate every single one of you. And random question, TOG's AKA FAY2, how long is your hair? It is too long. It is basically now
not long enough.
Mr. Bice says it's not long enough. No, it is basically hip length now at this point. It's mermaid length. It's a little too long.
Nope.
I think I need to get it trimmed.
Nope.
I need to make an appointment while we're in California.
No.
So Andy the Game Maker says, tell Mr. Bites to shut it. But he did also say that he and the kids had a lot of fun stargazing last night.
Hell yeah.
So
Jupiter's moons.
Yes, we did. Yeah, no, I did. Yeah. Another thing that we saw, which I didn't mention, was Jupiter's moons. We were actually able to see them, which was really, really, really cool. Okay. Anyway, let's get back to it. And once again, Sandra, thank you so much for gifting 20 memberships. That's so, so, so generous of you. Oh. So we're waiting on, I think, the prosecution.
Mr. Witkin, I'm showing you this check that was now been marked as Exhibit 66, and also a blow-up of that check. I'd like to ask you, is this the check you made reference to with which you were paid for your services that day?
Yes.
Now, you seem to have the original of the check. Is there a reason for that?
Yeah, when we deposited the check, it came back from our bank as undepositable with a stamp on it that says refer to maker.
And after it came back to you, did you save it?
We did.
And did you give it to the police sometime?
Yeah. I believe it was the 11th of December when I spoke to the police and gave them my original statement. I also gave them this check.
So on December the 11th of 1989, you had an interview with the police. Is that correct?
Yes.
And at that time, did you?
And I'm sorry, I'm interrupting again, but I wanted to, I just noticed this response from Sandra saying, no problem, let's pay it forward and do something kind for someone else. I spent the morning at the DV shelter giving small gifts to the kiddos. Do good in the world. Ah, amazing, amazing. Sandra, massive applause to you. Massive, massive applause. Doing applause from Mr. Bites as well. doing some real good in the world. I 100% want to encourage that as well. I think that is absolutely wonderful that you're dedicating your time, you're paying it forward, giving out gifts. I love it. I love it. It makes me so happy to see that. And this is one of the reasons why I love this community, right? We've got folks like Sandra, and and everyone else in here as well. You can see it with the kind of dialogue that people get into in the chat. I love it. Respectful dialogue where people can disagree, they can agree, disagree, but they do so in a way that is kind and caring and understanding. And I love it. And Sandra, fantastic, amazing. Like, this is exactly the Christmas spirit that I'd love to see. So thank you. Okay.
Did you identify the check that you've just shown us as Exhibit 66?
Yes, I did.
And did you give them a statement about your activities on August the 31st of 1989?
Yes, I did.
Now, when you spoke to the police, did you review a copy of the police report before testifying today?
Yeah, I did.
Okay. When you spoke to the police, I believe you indicated that Lyle Menendez asked you to look for 3 files, which were Menendez, Erik, and Will.
Right.
And I believe your testimony here and in front of the grand jury was that you were asked about 4 files.
Right.
Okay. What is your best recollection as to what you were asked by Lyle Menendez? Was it 3 or 4 items?
4 files. I apologize. I was a little scared the first time through.
When you say, when were you scared?
When I spoke to the police, and also when I
How about, were you nervous in front of the grand jury?
definitely nervous in front of the grand jury.
Right.
Also nervous now. But
All right. Well, one final question. Does your business Leviathan Development advertise in the Yellow Pages?
yes, it does.
Okay, thank you. I have
Yellow
nothing further
Pages.
to witness at this time.
All right, cross-examination.
This will be interesting to see Cross now.
How long do you think your examination would be?
I think it will be at least 15, possibly 20 minutes.
Okay, then we'll have to do it at 1:30 then, ladies and gentlemen. We'll excuse you until 1:30. Don't discuss this case with anyone. Don't form any opinions about it, and we'll see you back here at 1:30.
Yeah, this is an interesting case here too. Remember, if you're going to have someone try to cover your
Jury
crimes,
box, and we'll
make sure
resume with
your
the
check doesn't
examination of
bounce.
Mr. Witkin, if you would take the witness stand again, please.
So we've got Mr. Witkin returning to the stand after a quick recess. But yeah, it's an interesting point there, right?
All right, cross-examination.
Mr. Witkin, this is about 1:30 in the afternoon when you received this call on August 31st. Is that
Yes,
right?
sir.
And I think you told us that you actually had a telephone call with Lyle Menendez before you arrived at the house. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And what was the telephone conversation you had with him at that time?
Roughly along the lines of, hello, this is Howard Witkin. I'm with Leviathan Development. You called my office for service call. Do you still need that? Exactly where do you need me to go? And I should be there in a few minutes. I'm just a few blocks from you.
All right. And at that time, Lyle Menendez told you that he wanted you to retrieve some information from his computer,
Yes, sir.
and he wanted you to do it immediately. Isn't that what he told you?
Yes, sir.
He didn't use the words desperately as you testified in cross-examination, did he?
Word for word, I don't recall. It's been 4 years. But my general impression was it was an emergency. It needed to happen then that day, that we had a couple of hours before he was leaving Los Angeles. But I'm sure the word desperate wasn't spoken. And I don't remember the exact word for word conversation.
By the way, you reviewed, I think you said, your grand jury testimony before you testified here today, right?
Yes, sir.
And you reviewed a police report that contained an interview that you had with the Beverly Hills Police Department in December of 1989.
Yes, sir.
And did you remember when you were reading the part of your grand jury testimony that at one point during the grand jury proceedings you were asked what you did for a living, and your answer was at page 84, "We are an emergency response troubleshooting firm, so people would call us with any computer-related problems. Unfortunately, one of the most common is, quote, I have erased something, I have lost it, help, I desperately need this," end quote. Do you remember giving that testimony?
Something to that effect,
Right,
yes,
so
sir.
that's probably where this word desperately came from. You were describing in general the state of people that call you up and desperately want you to come over and retrieve something from a computer.
Possibly, yes.
Right, now, after you had the telephone conversation, or even before it, I think your impression was that the name of the person you were dealing with was Lyle Menendez,
Right,
correct?
as I actually wrote it down on my little notes that I was keeping, I wrote it down as Mendez.
And was that a mistake you made, your office made, or did Lyle Menendez say, my name is Lyle Menendez?
I sincerely doubt that he gave the name incorrectly. I'm pretty positive that either I heard it incorrectly or my dispatcher heard it incorrectly.
And in any event, when you arrived at the house, somebody there informed you that the correct name of the person you were dealing with was Lyle Menendez, correct?
Yes, sir.
And then you had a conversation with Lyle in which he introduced himself as Lyle Menendez.
I believe he introduced himself just as Lyle.
And at that point, you knew his name was Menendez because the security guard had said the true name is Lyle Menendez.
Yeah, I think that the time that I was
Lisa,
absolutely
number
certain what
7.
the last name
Very
was
happy
at the
to
very
see
end
this.
when I
Thank you.
had a
Thank you for
check that
sharing
said
that.
Menendez. So when I actually looked and when I went and took the check with me, then I was sure it was Menendez. At what point I realized that I had the name incorrect, I can't recall.
Right? And
Whether it was exactly at the beginning or some point
Sure.
in a later conversation.
at any point in time when you were dealing with Lyle Menendez that day, did he ever say to you, this is a confidential, words to the effect of, this is a confidential matter and I don't want you disclosing that you and I had this conversation?
No, the only
Barney
thing that
Cat,
he
love to see
stated
this
to me
too.
that was confidential was the information on the system
As the reason why
as
you
the
would
reason
like,
why he wanted the information eliminated.
and when you say the information, you mean everything that was on there that you would retrieve, correct?
Yes, sir.
In other words, he never said to you, I just want the information relating to the word will, or the other words I think you said were Lyle, Erik, and Menendez, correct?
No, the times at which there was a specific reference to specific files or specific information was at the point when I was asked, can you find this information? When we got to the point of can you eliminate, it's this, and the information on this computer is confidential. We're getting rid of the computer. Please make sure that that confidential information is eliminated.
And that made perfect sense to you in terms of what you do for a living,
Absolutely.
what people ask you to do.
Absolutely.
Could you tell whether that computer had been wiped before you got there?
It had not been wiped, meaning no one had used something like wipe file that eliminates everything on the disk. But the 3 files that I was looking for, the information that they had, in the 3 files or 4 files that I was looking for, the information that they possessed, which was essentially a directory listing, would have been very difficult. It's not reasonable that I would have found exact same copies of the same information in all 4 of those files that was time-stamped, 1 minute apart, unless someone had consciously copied that information over those files. So the whole disk had not been consciously erased, but it was my impression that someone, whether purposefully or accidentally, had made a conscious effort and copied information over those files.
How old was that computer?
Probably 4 years, 5 years. mean, it was an XT, so at that point, it was already an old style. It was already an outdated technology.
And just in general, how easy was it for someone unskilled in operating that computer to learn how to use that as compared maybe to some simpler computers?
From what I recall, the programs that he had loaded were very simple and very basic programs. So, I mean, I could teach my mom to use it in probably an hour,
All right.
maybe a little longer.
And did Lyle Menendez ever say that he knew how to operate the computer?
No, sir.
Did he ever say that he had attempted to retrieve the information off the computer?
I don't recall.
Now, as I understand it, you started looking through the system, and at one point you identified, I think you said 4 words, correct?
Yes, sir.
And the 4 words were Will, Erik, Menendez, and
Lyle.
Lyle.
Yes, sir.
And then from seeing those words, you then did a directory search and came up with a list under Menendez?
I came up with a list that included several of those file names, including Menendez. As you do a list, you see files, command files, you see all of the different program files within the system.
All right. And
also, just really quick, Chaos Girl Friday, thank you so much for the very generous super chat. It says, happy holidays to you and your family. Thank you. Happy holidays to you and yours as well. I hope you're able to stay warm, right? Unless you're in the Southern Hemisphere. We do get folks from Australia here in South Africa and whatnot. So for them, it's probably well, it is summertime, right? But assuming you're in the Northern Hemisphere, stay warm and stay with, hopefully you're able to be surrounded by some friends and family that are loving and wonderful. So thank you so much. Very, very kind of you.
And I have 3 computer programs which I've had marked as Exhibit 68, 69, and 70. 68 is actually a printout.
Yes.
Can you pick up that and tell me if you can identify that?
Yeah,
Yes.
What would you like to know about it?
Tell,
Hold on a
first of all,
second.
tell the jury.
Wait. Have you seen this?
I've seen it, but I don't know which one is which.
This is a computer printout, correct?
Yes, it is.
And at the top of the printout, it shows the words C/print Menendez, correct?
Yes. And
just looking down the program here, or the printout, can you tell what's being done by the person who's operating?
Yeah, whoever is attempting to use this, the first, if you notice, as it's printing each line, it's printing the DOS print. It's printing everything as it would appear on the screen. Generally, when you type on a computer, it doesn't print out each thing that displays on the screen. The one way to get it to do that is there's a key that says print screen that you can hit and then force it to print everything as you do. What it looks like is it is someone who doesn't understand how the machine works, making their best effort to try to print these files. So the first thing is they probably hit the control print screen, which didn't work, which then put it in print mode, and then they're trying to print file after file.
And
But
does it indicate the files that are sought to be printed are, first of all, Menendez?
Yeah, this doesn't imply anything about what's actually there, but it says someone's trying to print a file called Menendez, but the syntax is wrong. The way they're doing it is incorrect. They have some knowledge because they're actually using real DOS commands. They're just using them improperly. Another print command, another find command looking for Menendez, another one looking for something called Will, something trying to find Will.
Again, all improper.
All improperly executed, but it's close.
And is that basically what you were doing when you were there that
No,
day,
sir.
in terms of calling up the words Menendez and Will after you found those listed in the directory?
Similar, but with the commands done correctly.
Right. And looking at exhibit number 69, I wonder if you could tell us what that is.
This looks like an actual directory listing.
And that's a directory listing that you would obtain, at least on that computer, if you gave it a command to search. under
I'm not,
Menendez?
On what
I
computer?
couldn't say what computer this came from. This is not a document I've ever seen before, so I'm not sure
I
where
understand
this.
On whatever computer that was printed on.
Yeah, this is someone asking for a list of all files that are in what's called the root directory, the very lowest level list, the most basic list on the computer.
We have it clarified that this is or is not what you saw when you did your computer search.
To tell you the truth, I have no idea whether this is from that computer or not. It could be, to reproduce this would be very simple from pretty much any computer
Any computer that had those files.
that had these specific files.
And that printout was made using the,
This looks like it was just made just by doing a dir, but someone who had already done a control print screen.
and what
Which
is this line meaning? Volume in drive C is, and then in capital letters, Menendez.
You have the ability on any PC to type in a command called label, which will allow you to assign that PC a name. It's not a permanent name. So if I wanted to take, if there's any PC in the room, I can take in a second and just say label Menendez and then do a directory and then say label Witkin and the label would be gone. So this is whoever printed this directory at some point typed out label Menendez. Either if this is the machine that was in that room, then that could be that, or it could be from a machine in your office as a recreation, or
And
be
how
from
about
anywhere.
Exhibit 7? Could you describe what that purports to be?
it looks like a directory listing of a subdirectory called, no, it looks to be a subdirectory listing. But if you look again, the command, what appears to be the command that's creating it is not a command that could create it. So this is a printout from some sort of file, but it's a list of half a dozen files, including one called Will, one called Menendez, and one called List. And
And
this strikes me as similar. When I had said before that each of the three files contained garbage, contained no meaningful information, this is similar to what would have been in each of those files. This is similar to what I saw, where what the file contained was actually a 4 or 5 file listing of a directory.
all right, and that is Exhibit 70 is similar to what you would have seen.
Similar. I couldn't identify if that's exactly the file. And again, I'm not sure what this is from, and it's what this printout came from or where.
Now,
Yeah.
under the word will, in Exhibit number 70, there is a number which says 59, and then next to that number there is what appears to be a date, 1/13/87, and what appears to be a time, maybe 4:58 Could you explain to the jury what that information means?
Yeah, the way an XT computer works, this is the early computer, is it has the ability to track a time and a date. But as a general rule, it tracks that time and date from whatever time you turn it on, starting with February 1st, 1980, 12 a.m. So if I took an XT right now, turned it off and turned it on, and asked it what time it was, it would tell me it's 12 a.m., February 1st, 1980. And they all start from there. The way you get a different date is you type the word date, hit return, and it'll ask you, what date do you want me to think it is? And you tell it what date you want, and then you tell it what time you want, and then it will hold that date and time. Newer computers, the AT and after that, have a battery. So you create the time when you set up the computer originally, and then generally it keeps track of the time from that date on a going forward basis.
And can you tell
So-
from looking at that printout when the file will was created, at least the one on that printout?
It purports to have been created the 13th of January, 1987, but there's no way to know that for sure. Because basically you can take and create this file. I mean, I can create and time and date stamp it any day or any time. Because this machine, when you turn it on, you have to type in the date and the time to it. There's no way really to know whether this is an accurate or an inaccurate date stamp. As a general rule, time and date stamps on XTs are not considered to be reliable. On an AT or a 386 or a 486, where it has an ongoing clock calendar that it tracks, you can generally consider those to be reliable.
And how about the number 59? What does that mean? In reference to that file called will?
What that tracks is the number of bytes, the number of letters in the file. If if perchance this were an actual, say this were an actual directory or the actual content of those files, what you note on it, this is similar to what I recall, is that all 3 files were the same exact size, which this shows 59. They were all, fairly trivial size. They all contained the exact same contents, which was a 4 or 5 file name listing. But also, if you notice on this, regardless of the date, they're time-stamped 1 minute after the other, which means if it had happened accidentally, if the machine, like the hard disk, had crashed and miscopied files or mislinked a file, you would not find each of the files to be the same size and time-stamped 1 minute after the other, which kind of implies that whoever created these files, whoever wrote over these files, did it in a purposeful fashion, that they went one after the other and copied, if I typed dir space a greater than sign and the word will, I would take exactly this data and stamp it right over whatever had been in the file will. But then type dir space greater than sign Eric, I do the same thing to Eric. Same thing to Menendez. So what it appears is, however this file was created, is it was written one after the other over each of the 3 files.
And just looking at that printout, can you tell how much information, and by how much, I mean how many words, are in that file called will, just looking at the printout?
59 letters, so nothing substantial. I mean, 59 letters, you figure 8 letters a word, so you're looking at 8, 10, 8 words, 10 words.
So in terms of a will, have you seen many wills with
No.
59 letters in it?
No. I mean, definitely if the file itself were a will, it was no longer on that machine when I sat down to look at it.
By the way, in your business, have you been called upon to call up a lot of wills on computers?
Not that I ever recall.
Have you ever heard of a will on a computer?
Absolutely.
You have?
Yeah. I haven't played with it, but in fact, it's no longer, but what used to be one of the best-selling personal programs was a program that I believe was called Will Maker, which was designed specifically to allow a person to create a will on his own. You take it home, and there's numerous little programs that are designed to let you create documents. If you don't want to take it outside, or you don't want to bear the expense, it will piece the documents together for you. So actually, for personal use, for home use, a Will Maker was a pretty common piece of software. Or in fact, if you wanted to just take it in a word processor and just type it up, if you want to be able to leave a record, it's a simple place to do it.
Now, I think you said as you were trying to retrieve this information that Lyle Menendez was leaving your area where this computer wasn't going other places?
Unless you mean during the course of the time that I was there, he came
Right.
in and out of the room several times. He was
And
with me for the first couple of minutes, went away downstairs, came back again, went downstairs, came back again.
I realize it's been 4 years, but do you remember a conversation you had with him about saving any information on the computer, be it will or anything else?
I'm not sure what you mean by to save it. I mean, the original conversation is, can you recover it?
In other words, was there a request that a printout be made?
Not that I recall.
It could have been you simply don't recall.
It could be that I simply don't recall.
Now,
I know that none of these, I could be pretty positive that.
Now, here's something that I haven't really talked about with regard to this computer will sort of testimony. And it's not necessarily having anything to do with what they are talking about here necessarily, but I'm just, I don't know what the standards were in the 1990s, but I can tell you now that in California, as in many, if not most, if not all states, is that in order to have a proper will, it's not just typing pages up or typing words up on a page, right? Whether it's on a physical piece of paper or in a Word document on a computer, you still have to have signatures. You still have to have certain formalities in order for that to be a valid will, right? Just having words on the page, it could be technically typed up by anybody, right? So there are certain requirements, including signatures. So if that document was just like the type up of like the Word document, and this was back in the 90s where computers were like black and green, right? It wasn't like colored screens like what we have now, where a Word document looks like an actual piece of white paper where you can have font printed in various colors and whatnot, and this was pretty rudimentary in comparison to what we have today. So I don't, I don't even think, like, in the 90s, could you even scan a document and have it as a PDF on a computer back then? I don't know, because I haven't looked into that. And I was very, very, very little when this case happened. Um, but at the very least, in California, you can have a document that is saved on your computer that is a copy of your will, but that's not necessarily the same thing as the actual will itself. So okay, and I'm seeing in the chat that no, as in no, you couldn't have you couldn't have PDFs on your computer before, right? Like, that's a relatively new thing. PDF came out in 93. Okay, thank you. Um so this would have been just a simple Word doc that they are even looking for. It wouldn't have the all of the formalities of an actual will. So that's one thing that I'm kind of wondering why the defense is not bringing that up here. I mean, maybe not necessarily with this particular witness, right? Because he wouldn't be able to testify to what the legal formalities of a will actually are. But it's a very strange sort of theory on that level for me personally, following along the prosecution's case in chief here, that there's something about um the prosecution that I don't know. It's a weird following for me here. Let's see. We've got a question here. Aaron Murphy says, can a notary sign a handwritten will and test and make it legal? So what happens in the United States is, I know that notary can have a different kind of significance if you're in the US or in Europe, for example. I know that in many parts of Europe, at least, a notary is someone who, and I think Australia too. I think I remember talking to someone who like worked for a notary or something. Outside of the United States, oftentimes it means that is someone who signs a document. It like makes the document official, right? But in the United States, a notary is typically someone who just needs to spend like a Saturday getting training, and then they can become a notary. It's not like in Europe where it's like you have to be. I think you have to be a lawyer first for a certain amount of time, and it's like a massive hierarchical sort of thing. Like, you have to go through like tons and tons of training and experience and education in order to become one. But in the States, it's literally like, this is just someone who, they have a stamp in front of them, they have a notary book, and they basically just, or it's like a ledger, right? Where they basically witness the signature, right? Like, that's all it means, right? The notary in the United States, all that it does, all that a notary's signature and seal and whatnot does, is it basically says this signature is real. It doesn't say anything about the validity of the document itself. Like, a notary is not qualified to analyze a legal document and to say, like, this is a real will, this is a valid will, this is none of that. All they are able to do is to say, this person came to me with this document. They want to make sure that their signature here is going to be viewed as a valid signature. So whatever kind of a document it is, whether it's a contract, or it's a will, or it's, some kind of like banking document, sometimes you need to get a notary in order to it's basically just bolstering that signature, right? So that it shows that it's not just somebody who could have fraudulently copied that signature. No, you have someone who has been, who is professionally trained and has all kinds of potential liability for lying and fraud and all that kind of stuff. They have a specific stamp that is given to them by the county. They have a ledger that they write it all in, so that and then they get thumbprints from the people that are signing. So there's a whole process that goes with it, so that the notary can reliably look back at that signature on the document. They can look back at their ledger from the date that it was signed and everything, and they can say, yes, this is a real signature on this document. So that's basically what a notary would do. But all it does, like I said, is the only significance that a notary in the United States, especially in California, has is over that specific signature. The rest of the document, it doesn't mean anything about the validity of the document. So, but it still kind of comes back to this question of like, what is the significance of a will document in a 1993 computer that doesn't have PDFs? So it's not a full will with all of the formalities and everything. All that would really be able to show is a potential intent by someone to give their inheritance somewhere. Like basically, in other words, like the theory would be either mom or dad or both basically saying, yeah, we intend to disinherit our kids. The problem with that is that if they already had a will previously that gave their entire inheritance to their boys, to their sons, and then they have a draft of a new will that disinherits them, that's not enough to actually disinherit them. So it would still, you would still go back to the most recent will that is valid in a case like this. So anyway, so it's just it's interesting to me that that they're spending so much time on this. So I'm wondering if there's going to be more testimony that's going to come up forward that's going to talk about this issue of like, okay, but like this document that we're spending so much time, this will supposedly that they pained over with trying to delete and everything and making sure that there's no signs of deletion, that really doesn't actually make that much of a difference in the long run, right? Because it's like it's not a real will. It's just a draft of one. It's just a document. It's just a Word document, right? Just like any other piece of paper lying around your house. It doesn't have any legal significance if it doesn't have any signatures on it. And before we get moving, Perceptions of Reality, thanks so much for becoming a YouTube member. Welcome to Bite Club. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. That really means so much to me, that you are jumping in with the others to support the channel. Thank you so much. Welcome to Bite Club, and I look forward to seeing you in the next Casual Friday live stream. Unfortunately, not this Friday because of the holiday weekend, but next Friday for sure. And like I said, I'm going to try to think of a way to make up for this Friday as well. Let's see here. Is there anything else in here in the chat before? Aaron Murphy, right? I know notaries and it's like a side hustle. Yeah, for a period of time, I was a notary on top of, being a lawyer and whatnot. It was useful when I was putting together estate plans for people to be able to notarize some documents as well. So it's one less step to have to bring someone in for logistical reasons. So, okay. And then being Mindy T says, encounter that you will have a paper will. You just need to have two people sign up as a witness. Yeah. And the formalities can vary from state to state, right? So in some states you need to have a notary signature, right? A notary stamp on it. Or in some states, you just need to have two live witnesses that are disinterested, right? They're not beneficiaries. They're not trustees. They're not named in the document anywhere, right? So, and it can depend on, even in California, some documents require two witnesses, some documents require a notary signature. So that can differ also depending on the specific document that we're talking about, even within estate planning. So depending, the difference would be between like a will and a trust and a power of attorney. These can all get, they can all get pretty administrative pretty quickly. But yeah, so there are all kinds of ways of doing that. So, okay. Anyway, and then Southern Gal Jen says, even with notarizing, then it has to be filed with the courthouse, right? No, it doesn't actually. Well, it depends on when we're talking about. So if we're talking about a will, when the person who drafted the will, who put the will up, this is their estate, when that person dies, if it's just a normal will, and it's not a trust, and again, it also depends on the state. In California, if you have just a will, you will be opening up probate, in which case you will lodge that will with the court. Not filing, lodging, basically just, giving the will over to the court for a bit to say, like, hey, this is the real thing, this is the real deal. And then and you will open up probate that way, so you can start the process of administering the estate through the probate process. If you have a trust, it's different, because everything is basically outside of the court process. You don't have to go through probate court unless there is a specific question that the parties need guidance from the court to do. So that's the one time that they might have a copy of the trust that's included as an exhibit with some kind of a petition to the court, but it's a little bit different. It feels very different than typical litigation, where you have a complaint, you have an answer, and then, and you go back and forth in like the normal civil litigation standard. But yeah, with that, you don't necessarily file anything with the court unless we are in the administration process. So before that point, no, because remember that somebody who puts together a will, they let's say I'm drafting my will, I write it all out, I sign it, I get all of the witness signatures, notary signatures, everything that I need for that state. I might change my mind. And in fact, these documents should be kind of growing with you. Every time you have a major life event, you should actually be changing, or at least taking a look at those documents again. When you get married, if you get divorced, if you have a kid, if you have multiple kids, if you have someone that you had listed as your trustee or backup trustee, and they die, right? Then you have to think, like, who could take the place of this role. There's all kinds of reasons to take a look at this stuff and to rewrite it. So that's one reason why just filing it when someone's still living is, that wouldn't be a good idea anyway, because that's just a lot of court process for really no reason. Here's another interesting question. Sophie Poyser says, when should you write your first will? So I would say, as someone who has drafted a number of estate plans, I would say, have something down, on paper. Once you're over 18, making some kind of money, right? Even if you have debt, you've got student debt, it's worthwhile to at least have some amount of direction for it. I will say, when it comes to doing a will or a trust, there's all kinds of questions that come up, and a lot of times it has to do with, like in California, it would make a difference, like how much your overall assets are, as to like whether you need a will or a trust. But I would say to have something, like, as soon as you are, out in the world, post college, making some kind of income, it's a good idea. It's a good idea to have some kind of document down, some kind of like overall sort of package, including powers of attorney, including, healthcare, an advanced medical directive. That's a similar thing to your financial power of attorney. Usually refers to financial and legal questions. Advanced medical directive refers to making medical decisions. So, but yeah, if you have any kind of money in savings, you have any kind of assets, you have any kind of real property, and you don't have any kind of estate planning done, I would highly recommend that you have something done, for your that is valid for your jurisdiction. Okay. All right. Well, that was a little bit of a divergence, but I feel like important things covered. So, okay, let's continue on.
That none of these printouts, possibly with the exception of the one that contains the file content, were while I was there.
And the one you just picked up is what, Exhibit 7?
That is Exhibit 70. But I know 68 isn't. only because I know how those commands work. So I know that that wasn't my work because I know how those commands work. The other I don't recognize and don't believe it was actually a printout from before I touched it, only because these other subdirectories, for example, the one with the wills in it, don't appear in this listing. So these two are not consistent, as if they didn't come from the same machine at the same time.
But 70 may have.
70 is
been there.
possible that this may have been a printout of the contents of that file. I don't recall having printed it, but there's certainly the possibility that I did so.
Now, in terms of what happened after you told Lyle Menendez that you couldn't retrieve any of the information, he said to you at that point that that was good because what he really would like to do is, since they were selling the computer, he wanted to have all the information on the machine erased. Isn't that one of the things he said?
He wanted to, not necessarily all of the information, meaning like I'm sure he wouldn't mind if the programs themselves had, but apparently what he asked is there was information on the machine that was confidential, private, personal financial information that he did not want in anyone else's hands, and could I make sure that that information would not be recoverable? The best way that I know how to do that is to make sure that nothing exists on the disk. If you want to make sure that if you're an investor and you want to make sure that your investment information or certain inside trader information or confidential information is gone, what you want to do is erase it all.
And you then use this Norton
Wipe
disk
disk and
to
wiped it clean.
wipe it out.
Yes, sir.
And in terms of someone coming in behind you, a competent computer expert, would that expert be able to tell immediately, or at least after a couple of minutes of examination, whether the wipe disk had been used?
Depending on what he looked, if he suspected, like if I suspected someone had used wipe disk before I was there, then I could have discovered that.
How do you discover that?
I would have looked at a sector of the disk that did not contain any files and looked to see whether it was random ones and zeros, or whether it was all ones or all zeros, and just kind of look or see if there were bits of data. For example, if I create a file and erase it and create it and erase different files, it'll leave scattered bits of data. So you can look in the areas that aren't files and just see what's out there and see whether it's clean. If it's clean, then someone's erased it. If it's got random scattered data, then it's just the natural, nothing's been written there yet. If I didn't know to look for it, I wouldn't have looked in the non-file areas. So it's only if the person suspected that someone had done so and was consciously looking for it that they would have noticed it.
Now, when you got done with this transaction, you then told them that it was going to cost them $150 for your
Yes, sir.
services.
Yes, sir.
And you wrote out a receipt with your name on it, correct? Your company name and also your personal name?
Yeah, we have standard service authorizations that we use. It was Exhibit 64, I guess, where we use a standard document in which we can write what we did. So anyone that we work for, they can go back and later and refer, see what work we had performed for them. So I wrote out a receipt of who I was, who the work was done for, and what was done.
And do you keep a copy of that bill that you give to him?
Yeah, there's a copy that we leave with the customer, a copy that comes back to the customer with the mailed invoice, a copy that we keep, the original sign sheet that we keep in our files, and then one other copy that we keep in a numerical sequence filed away.
And did Lyle Menendez ever indicate to you that he would not like any paperwork created on this transaction, and that he'd give you a little bit extra money if you didn't do that?
No, sir.
And do you recall him saying, I'd rather pay in cash, or that there wasn't any record of this transaction?
I recall him writing the check to cash, but I don't recall any offer to actually pay in cash, but he wrote the check.
Which, that also kind of indicates that there's a paper trail. So if he's paying in cash so that there's no paper trail, that kind of defeats the purpose if he writes out a check to him to cash.
Check to me as a check written to cash.
Do you remember why that was done?
I don't believe he was explicit.
All right. And the check itself had the name Menendez right on it, correct?
Yes, sir.
With the address?
Yes, sir. Different address.
Different address. And you took that check back to your office and tried to cash it, and the bank sent it back.
I took it back, turned it over to my controller, who put it in our deposit, and the bank sent it back.
And did that kind of bring the transaction back to mind and alert you to the fact that there was some sort of problem?
When the check came back from the bank, stamped refer to maker, and I saw the next day an article in the newspaper related to the case, I realized it wasn't a real pleasant thing.
All right. And
And at that point, I called the police and anonymously said, I don't know who this is, but here's what happened and here's what I know.
And in terms of hiding the transaction, probably not a real good thing to do to give you a bounce check, was it?
There can cause speculation upon witness.
Sustained.
Yeah.
Did you
Well, yeah, he asked the
see
question.
the
Jared
article
got
in
to
the
hear the
paper on
question.
December 5th, 1989?
Yes, sir, I did.
And that was an article in the Los Angeles Times indicating that the police were starting to investigate the possibility that a will had been erased.
Yes, sir. And that was the first time I realized that the word will might not have been a first name.
Right. And did you have the check between August 31st and December 5th? In other words, up to that point, you had no idea the connection of this transaction with what you saw reported in the newspapers.
I knew there was something about it, so I kept everything, pulled everything into a separate file and turned it over to my lawyer and told him, keep this. Someday we may need to do.
In other
We may
words,
need it.
even before that day, even before
When the
December
check came back
5th,
refer to maker, I realized there was something. I mean, I realized there was a murder case. I realized that I had been in the house, and I turned it over to my lawyer. I mean, it wasn't. When I was in the house the original day, something about the transaction, and especially when we got to the point of make sure it looked like you hadn't been here, made my spine crawl. So I knew there was something. I strongly felt, at least subconsciously, there was something very unusual and very wrong.
let me ask you this. When you went to the house, did you know it was the house where the killings had taken place?
I had no awareness of the killings. I generally don't read the murder news.
And when was it that you decided to give the check to your attorney to hang on for later use?
After the check came back, refer to maker, a week later, 10 days later, when I saw an article and realized that this case existed, is when I gave it to him to hold. So it was probably the 15th of September.
And then on December 5th, you made an anonymous phone call to the Beverly Hills Police Department indicating that you had some information about the computer that they were
Yes, sir.
investigating at that point. Correct?
Yes, sir. When I read the article in the Times and realized that it was something of significance related to the case, I called the police.
And at that point, you didn't want to reveal your identity because basically you were fearful of being involved in something as serious as this, correct?
Absolutely.
And the way that the police got to you, well, let me ask you, do you know how the police got your name finally, if you didn't come forward?
Well, my first question to them when I called them on the 5th. They called and told them a little bit of what I knew. They called me on the 6th. My initial speculation was, maybe they had traced the call. What I was told is that, in fact, they had served a search warrant on the house, found the receipt, which had my name, our company's address and phone number. They contacted me the next morning and asked if I'd come talk to them.
And they told you that that receipt with your name on it was in the exact location where you had left it back on August 31st, 1989. Did they?
They told me that it was found in the house, and it was found with the computer. They didn't tell me where they had found it. I mean, they didn't tell me where in the room they had found the receipt, but they told me that they had found the receipt with the computer.
Still in the house where you had been
Still in
back
the house where I
August.
had been.
That's all I had. Thank you.
Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. May I approach, please?
Yes.
Mr. Witkin, I'm not going to go over these in great detail, but these three exhibits that the defense attorney marked, number 68, 69, and 70, which appear to be on regular computer paper, right? Now, these three exhibits, I had this kind of paper and I had an IBM computer at home. Could I go home tonight and make an exhibit like this?
Do you have half an hour, 10 minutes?
Right, so in other words, I think what you told us during your testimony was that
I've just got to say, she needs a mic. She needs to ask these questions in front of her mic.
a computer doesn't know what time it is unless you tell it. Is that right?
Absolutely.
And even though my computer might think that today is August the 2nd, 1993, I could go home tonight and tell it that it's really March the 2nd, 1972 if I wanted to, right?
2 commands, 10 seconds maybe.
All right, so, and then with that, I could recreate a directory.
You can rename it Menendez in another couple of seconds and type a directory and
Now,
have these printouts.
I just have a couple more questions. When I create a file in my computer, the computer, if it has the date and time correct, will indicate next to the file the date and time that that file was created. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Then if I go back into the file and I change the file
and I tell the computer that I want to save the changes. Does the computer put the new date and time of when the changes were done?
Yes.
All right, so in other words, I believe in Exhibit 70, there's something about will and something about, just a moment. There's a date in Tampa. This date appears to be January 13th, 1987.
Right.
With the time. But that doesn't mean that's when the file was created. That means that's when it was last accessed and changed.
That would be when it was last changed, last written over.
And I believe you indicated that there, according to Exhibit 70, that file created contained 59 bytes. Is that correct?
Yes.
And byte is computer terminology for
One letter.
One letter. All right. If in fact the file was changed and previously it had contained 20,000 bytes and it had been changed to just 59 bytes, would the fact that there previously had been 20,000 bytes be reflected once you changed it to 59?
No.
Thank you. I have nothing further.
No, Your Honor.
Just to clarify, you referred to timestamps on the 4 files that you saw on your computer.
Yes.
Looked at the computer screen, is that right?
Yes.
Do you recall what the timestamps were, what the dates were?
That's right. I do not.
You have
Sorry.
no recollection whatsoever.
Because on an XT, time and date stamps are so meaningless, and you never look at them, never refer to them. If you look at most XTs, probably half the files are dated 1980, only because most people don't change the time and date.
Okay, all right. Anything else?
They're basically meaningless.
Okay, thank you. You may step down. All right, let me see counsel at the sidebar, please. All right, there is a matter that I want to discuss with counsel. It'll take a few minutes, and if it looks like it'll take longer, we'll let you know. But I'd ask that you go into the jury room, not discuss this case with anyone, don't form any opinions about it. And as soon as we're ready, either to continue or if we need a longer recess, I'll send bailiff in there and let you know that so that we can get you out of there. All right, the jury has left the courtroom, and we can have counsel out, or counsel here, and the defendant, Erik Menendez, out, and we'll discuss the matter relating to him. The defendant, Erik Menendez, is in court as well. And in regards to Mr. Witkin's testimony, as it relates to Erik Menendez, what is the position of the parties?
I would like to present to Erik Menendez and the jury the simple fact that Mr. Witkin was there at the Menendez home on August 31st, 1989, and at the request of Lyle Menendez, used the Norton wipe to erase the computer as it related to the items that he was looking for, whether it was Menendez, Will, Erik, and Lyle. I would not propose to have before Erik Menendez's jury the fact that Lyle had written a check that bounced. So it would be brief testimony regarding the simple fact that there was in fact a computer expert who was there the day before Mr. Heyman arrived, and in fact used this Norton wipe on the computer.
And what is the response? Well, first of all, why do you want to show that to the jury?
Well, there's a number of reasons. As I've indicated, Mr. Signorelli had testified that Erik Menendez knew on September 1st, 1989, that his brother had a professional come and erase the will. In addition to that, there was testimony and cross-examination that Erik Menendez, in talking to Carlos Menendez over the phone, as related to by Mr. Heyman, that Erik Menendez disavowed any knowledge of that, telling his relative Carlos Menendez that he didn't have anything to do with it, he didn't know anything about it. So this,
let me see here. I think that we come back with more testimony from this witness. So let me go ahead and skip ahead here a bit.
Mr.
Right.
Carr will.
Okay. Yes, he does come back. Okay. So I will pause it here for a second. We got a couple questions here. T says, is it normal for a judge to ask clarifying questions to a witness? it happens. It does happen. Generally speaking, as the attorney that is asking questions, you don't want that, because it shows that you are the judge sees that you're kind of maybe struggling a little bit to tell the story to the jury. And the judge is generally speaking going to be asking that because they sense that the jury might not be following what's going on. Maybe that, of course, it depends from judge to judge. Some judges are going to have a leaning one way or another. So maybe there's always a possibility of some kind of implicit bias, but oftentimes I think that they will do that because either they sense that the jury might not be following, or maybe they themselves have a question in order to understand further testimony that they may just want a point of clarification. It happens. It's not ideal, but it does happen for sure. Brittany Alicia says 18 minutes behind, but our holographic will is still a thing. Yes. So a holographic will, for anybody that doesn't know, that isn't familiar, a holographic will is a handwritten will. So someone can take, just a piece of paper, any kind of paper, a napkin, a paper towel, any kind of a paper document, handwrite their will saying, like, this is who I am, this is the date, this is my last will and testament. I want this person to be my executor, the person who's going to administer the estate. These are the beneficiaries that I want. This is everything that's in my estate, whatever. You could write out all of that, and then technically it doesn't require a signature, because the logic behind that is that it's all been handwritten by you. So you can have someone analyze the writing on there to show that, yes, this is actually handwritten by the person that it purports to be written by, which is different than a Word document, right? You can't tell by looking at any old printed document, like a Word document, who typed it up, right? You can't tell like somebody's typing style based on the words on the page, but you can figure out somebody's handwriting style based on the words that are handwritten on a page. So holographic wills are a thing. They're still not the most ideal kind of document in the world. And I would venture to guess that various jurisdictions have various types of attitudes towards them. But they do exist. They still are at least theoretically a type of will that can work. Usually, I think that most commonly what you'll see when you see a holographic will is you'll see actually a holographic codicil, which is basically like an amendment to a will. So which basically says, hey, change out for executor. It used to be, so and so, and then I had 1, 2, 3 backup people. They might have just like a simple document that says change this person out, and then put these people in, and then you just kind of like attach it to the back of the will document, and you have a date and everything on there. Always have a date on these documents if you're gonna do that. But anyway, so that's the most common way that I think that you'll likely see something like that. But yeah, anyway, so yeah. Yeah, basically that's that. Okay. Now continuing on with this testimony from Mr. Howard Witkin.
My name is Howard Witkin, Witkin.
All right, you may proceed.
Thank you. Mr. Witkin, what do you do for a living, please?
I'm a computer consultant.
Wait a minute. Let me go back just a little bit here, because this might not be in front of the jury. Okay. Let me go back just for a little bit of context here.
Be recorded or transmitted out of the media room. Yes, we'll be in a short recess until we get clear up this intersection. Right, in the trial, the defendant Erik Menendez is in court with his lawyers. The people are represented, and the jury for Erik Menendez is also in court and will resume
Oh, I see.
at this time
Okay.
with
Yes. So this is, yeah, Care Bear. I realize this is basically the same moment that you typed this up. This testimony is in front of the Erik jury. So that was previously in front of Lyle Menendez's jury. So now, because I was very confused because I was like, wait a minute, we already know that he's a computer consultant. We know his background. Like, what's happening here? This is another one of these weird moments that where we have to deal with the dual jury system here in this trial, right? That there are two juries. There's the Erik Menendez jury and there's the Lyle Menendez jury. And most of the time they're both in the courtroom at the same time for these witnesses. But this previous portion of Mr. Witkin's testimony was just in front of Lyle Menendez's jury. And so now this is going to be in front of Erik's jury and I think Lyle Menendez. He just said, right? He said both. Correct me if you guys heard differently, but what I heard was he said that now we've got both juries here. Oops.
testimony regarding the defendant Erik Menendez. You may proceed.
People call Mr. Howard Witkin to the stand.
You do solemnly affirm that the testimony you may give in the court now pending before this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. This you do under the name of the Lord. You see the please and state your name for the record.
My name is Howard Witkin, Witkin.
All right, you may proceed.
Thank you. Mr. Witkin, what do you do for a living, please?
I'm a computer consultant. I have a computer service business. We provide emergency response service for people's computer systems.
And what kind of services do you provide to people?
We do hardware and software repair. We do disaster recovery, sales, installation, network design, software development, pretty much anything necessary to help people take care of their personal computer systems.
On August the 31st of 1989, did you go to a home located at 722 North Elm Drive at about 1:30 in the afternoon?
Yes, ma'am.
When you went to that location, did you meet with a man who became known to you as Lyle Menendez?
Yes, ma'am.
Did Lyle Menendez ask you to look for 4 specific things inside of the family computer?
Yes, ma'am.
What are the 4 things he asked you to look for?
He asked me to look for 4 files, specifically Lyle, a file named Lyle, one named Erik, one named Will, and one named Menendez.
Where was the computer physically located within the house?
In an upstairs bedroom immediately to the right when you walked in the doors.
Your Honor, I believe the witness has in front of him Exhibit 63. I have another one here put on this board. It's quite small, but Mr. Witkin, briefly, could you tell us what is depicted in the far corner of this picture?
This picture shows the bedroom into which I went, and it shows the computer in the far corner in the center of this picture. This is the computer that I went to work on.
At some point, did you erase that computer?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
And did you use a particular program to erase the computer?
Yes, ma'am, I used a program called Norton Wipe Disk.
And is that part of the Norton utilities?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
And could you just briefly tell us what does the wipe disk do to the computer?
What the wipe disk does is it takes the whole hard disk, the main storage place in the computer, and it writes over every single piece of information in it with either a 1 or a 0, and it erases it in such a way that it cannot be recovered.
At the completion of wiping or deleting everything on this computer, did you do something to reload programs onto the computer?
Yes, I took a series of floppy diskettes that they had. In fact, if you look in the picture, you can see them underneath the computer, and reloaded all of the original programs without any of the data files onto that computer.
So you had the generic program, but not any specific things that a user would have put into that.
Right. For example, if you had a word processor, I would have put back the word processor, but none of the documents or letters or paperwork that you had personally created, just those files that you would have purchased from the store.
Now, was anyone else there with you while you were doing this aside from Lyle Menendez inside of the home?
Not that I'm aware of.
Thank you. I have no further questions of this witness.
Cross-examination.
Ooh, quick, direct.
Mr.
Mr. Witkin, if you stand a little back from the mic, it won't keep popping the way it's popping. Okay. Did you turn on this computer and make an effort to locate the four named files?
Sorry, before, I'm going to rewind just to the beginning of her question, but it's just funny because it's like you can tell what kind of things bother Leslie Abramson. Popping on a microphone is one of them. I mean, but realistically, who doesn't that bother, right? I mean, it's I've been noticing it this whole time. Him and other people that have been testifying from the witness stand when they get a little close, it needs a pop filter. It would be so much simpler if the court would just put a little pop filter over it. Of course, they didn't have YouTube in those days, so the economics of getting a pop filter were probably very different than it is today, right? When you have more people that actually have a demand for it. I'm sure that they probably were more expensive back then than they are today. Anyway, okay, it was just a fun little aside. Let's go on.
Mr. Witkin, if you stand a little back from the mic, it won't keep popping the way it's popping. Okay. Did you turn on this computer and make an effort to locate the four named files that Lyle had asked you to look for?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
And do you recall whether you ever saw on the screen of that computer any files bearing the names that he had given you?
Yes, ma'am, I did find files on the computer which did have those file names.
Okay. Did you find a directory on the computer under the name Menendez?
Yes, ma'am, I believe I did.
Did you also find a file on the computer with the name Menendez?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you find a file on the computer with the name Will?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, would you explain to this jury what is a file in the sense that we use it when we talk about a computer?
If I could look, I can remember how I explained it an hour ago. Now,
Well,
a file is when you create anything on a computer, when you want to create a document. So you want to type a letter on your computer. So you sit down at the keyboard and you pull up a program and you type the letters and then you give it a name. And you say, I want to save this letter or this memo or this spreadsheet or whatever it is that you're working with. I want to save it. I want you to keep it for me so I can pull it up at a later time, and you give it a name. And it stores that name, it stores that file, which is the series of information on the computer disk, and then it stores a reference to that information in something called a directory. The directory is like an index. It's a list of names. Each name refers to a specific file, a specific document, and it tells the computer where to look on the hard disk to find that document when you next want to work with it.
Okay, so a file is not really a category. It's actually a particular document that you've
Exactly.
created. And if you created, let's say, the letter that you have described, you could name that letter 1 if you wanted.
You can name it anything that you would like to.
And if you then proceeded to create 15 more separate letters, you could give them each a number, and you'd have a series of files called letter 1 through 15.
Absolutely.
Okay. And the thing that you saw on this computer, strike that. Now, that would be the thing itself. The file itself would be each of these letters, 1 through 15.
Right.
And each time you create a document like this, create a file, the computer itself keeps track of all the things you've created in something called a directory.
Perfect.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And you can give directories different names too.
Right. If you were creating 1,000 letters, it becomes very difficult to ever find those again. Every time you wanted to find a letter, you'd have to look down this list of 1,000. So what it gives you the ability is you can create sub-lists. So you can make a list called business correspondence and a list called recipes and a list called personal correspondence and start to break it up into subcategories.
So you take that 1,000 letters, and if 300 were business correspondence, they'd show up under a subdirectory called
Right.
business correspondence.
Right. And then you may divide that up even farther, and you want to try to break it down enough that it's easy to discover where you've put a specific document if you want to find it again.
That's because if you want to start up with a computer and search for a particular document, you can tell it, look under letters, look under business correspondence, look under Joe Jones, and then it will bring up all in one shot all the Joe Jones letters in there.
Right.
Okay. That's known as a path, isn't it?
Yes.
Now, when you saw on this computer a file or document called will, is there something that you have to do when you see a file name on a computer to actually look at what the document says?
Yes, there is. If you're just in DOS, the basic operating system that tells a computer how to be a computer, the only thing that you'll really see is the list, is the index. If you actually want to see the contents, depending on how that was created, if it was created in some word processors, I have to either run the word processor itself because it puts special codes. It doesn't print it as normal letters. It puts it in a coded format. So some programs you have to run the actual program itself to see it. Some of them, if it's mostly text, if it's mostly just the letters, A, B, C, D, you can copy it to the screen, you can copy it to a printer, but you do have, it's a different command to see the reference to the document than it is to actually see the text or the body of the document itself.
Okay, DOS, the basic operating system for the computer. If you turn on a computer and you're in that operating system and you want to know the names of all the files or a list of all the files, you basically only have to type in dir for directory.
Right.
And it will then print up on the screen the name of every single file that's been created.
Within that directory, if you wanted to go into one of those subdirectories as we spoke, you would need to be explicit. Instead of saying dir, you'd say dir space Menendez, and it would show you all of the files that were within the subdirectory called Menendez.
But let's assume you don't know there are subdirectories.
Then you would
go
just
to
sit
a
down and type
computer,
dir, and it would tell you what's there.
All right.
I'm sorry.
One person at a time. Poor court
Go to a
reporter.
computer you've never looked at before, and you're in DOS, and you type dir, directory. It will then bring up a list of all of the other directories, the subdirectories, and all of the files that are just loose files. They're not inside another directory.
Exactly.
Okay. Now, let's say you don't go through the word processing program. Let's say you want to actually see the text of a particular file that's appeared on this list. What do? You're in DOS. Can you bring up text in DOS?
You can.
And what do you do to do that?
I would use a command called copy. I would do copy, space, and then the file name. Say the file name was called letter. If I wanted to see it on the screen, I would type COPY space LETTER space CON and a colon, which says copy the contents of the file letter to my console, which is my screen.
Which
and
means,
it would display it it would take and display it on the screen.
Okay, so let's say that now you're at the Menendez computer and you want to see the content of this file that you've seen that has the name Will. Mm-hmm. And you do what you just described. Copy blank Will, colon.
Right.
Okay? And then you would expect that what would come up on the screen is whatever is in that file, whatever that document called Will is, correct?
Depending on the word processor, yes.
Okay.
Certain word processors embed certain codes so that it doesn't just have the text, it has codes, and those codes may prevent it from being possible to just view on the screen this way. But you could get an approximation of the file in this fashion.
Did you try that in order to read that file called Will? Did you try to read that file called Will?
Yes, I used a different kind of editor, not a DOS editor. I used one that is not sensitive to these other control codes, to the non-printable characters, the non-letter information.
Okay, let me just
So
ask a question about that. Word processing programs have a series of codes that look like complete hieroglyphics
Right.
to the human eye. And every document created in one of these word processing programs has these hidden codes.
Right.
You don't see them on the screen, but they're there.
Right. It tells
and if you try to read them through DOS, I think what you're saying is sometimes you'll get on the screen those hieroglyphic codes
Right.
instead of the alphabet typed out information.
Right.
So you went in using something like Xtree?
I used Xtree was to see what files existed. I probably used IBM's professional editor to look at the file. And that's the one I generally carry for that type of task. I don't recall exactly which one I used, but I would guess that would be the tool I would use.
So you used one of these programs and you wanted to see what was in this file, Will, and did you see what was in that file, Will?
Yes, I did.
And what was in that file will?
What was in that file will was a directory listing of one of the subdirectories.
So it wasn't
wasn't
actually a document.
No, per
Or if
se.
it was a document, it was a document that just had a list of file names.
Of 4 file names or 5 file names.
And did you do the same thing with the other headings of this? You said that you had seen several files.
Whichever files were there that were on the list, I did the same thing.
And if for each and every one that you did that to, did it wind up that you got an identical screen? In other words, each of those files had the identical information in them, which
To the
was
best of my recollection, they were each identical.
and they were a directory.
And they were a directory.
And do you recall now that when you looked at that, when you did this, I'll strike that. Do you recall now that when you first saw the directory on the screen that had these file names, that the files, or at least some of them, appear to have been last worked on or last changed within a minute or so of each other?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, this was an IBM XT computer,
Yes, ma'am.
and at that time, it was an old one when you saw it.
Definitely.
And at that time, when you would turn on one of those IBM XT computers, if you wanted it to keep track of the date, you'd have to actually tell it what the date was on that day that you turned the machine on.
Right. The way an XT was designed, whenever you turned it on, it would think it was 1980. And then you would have to explicitly tell it the date. It is possible to put a special card in it that would make it have an ongoing clock. I don't know for sure whether or not one of those was in the machine. Don't recall that.
So it could have had
So
a special card that would have acted like a continuous clock, the way
Right.
more modern computers act
Right.
now. So all you'd have to turn it on and it would know
And
the
it would
date,
know whatever, relative to whatever date it thought it was yesterday, it would still be progressing. I don't
assuming there
recall
wasn't power outages and things like that.
battery failures and the like.
Okay, so this could have been a computer that was keeping track of its own time, or it could have been a computer where you'd have to actually type in the date each day when you turned it on.
Right.
Okay. Now, do you recall that these files that you found, and you do remember at least one was called Will and one was called Menendez?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you recall that they appeared to have the same date and a time of just 1 minute apart?
Yes, ma'am.
And do you recall, Mr. Witkin, if the other things that you saw on the directory, other entries, also had the same date or a different date?
To tell you the truth, I don't recall.
Objection vague as to what other things on the directory.
All right, let's be more specific, please.
Okay. When you searched this computer and came up with, I believe you said it was a subdirectory that contained those specific file names, Will and Menendez?
So,
And what was the name of the subdirectory?
I believe the subdirectory was called Menendez. I don't recall that from the original time. I do recall that from, or it was refreshed from an earlier exhibit that I was presented that seems to have been similar to one of those files.
Your Honor, I'm holding an exhibit that's been previously marked 70. May I approach?
Yes.
Now, Mr. Witkin, our jury is there. So I'll stand here so when you answer my questions, you're still directing your voice towards them. Let me show you Exhibit 70. Now, you have seen that exhibit before in this courtroom a little while ago.
Yes, ma'am.
And in looking at Exhibit 70, does Exhibit 70 appear to be similar to what you saw on the screen of the Menendez computer?
Similar.
You can't say that it's identical to what you saw, is that correct?
Right.
But you also can't say that it's totally different.
Right.
Was there a printer in the bedroom of this home where this computer was?
I don't recall, but I can look at the picture and tell you.
Well,
But I really don't.
See if you can see a printer, but
Yeah, to tell you the truth, I really don't remember. And I don't see one. Yes, I do see one directly on top of the machine.
so there is.
So I
a
would say
printer.
that there is, in fact, a printer there.
And the paper that Exhibit 70 is made up of, is that standard computer printout paper?
It's standard wide carriage paper. And it is in fact the kind of paper that would more than likely have been used in this printer that I see here. This is a wide carriage printer, so there's a good chance that this is the type of paper that they would have used.
Okay,
Generally, for home use, most people don't buy the wide carriage paper.
okay, but would it make sense to you if this was a computer, in fact, that had come from a business and then was taken home?
Definitely possible.
Okay, let's look then at what's on Exhibit 70. And let's start with the first line. It says C. Is that a greater than sign?
Yes.
C : / Menendez.
Right.
Okay, but what is that? Is that an attempt at a command?
totally meaningless attempt at a command.
You have to keep
Sorry.
talking into the microphone.
It's an attempt at a command. It's attempting to execute a program called Menendez.
Okay, and it doesn't work because it's not a proper
It's
command.
not a proper command.
Now, the next line says DOS, does it not?
Yes.
And next to that, it's in parentheses, it says directory.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, what is that?
That is identifying a subdirectory called DOS.
Okay,
So that whatever this listing is a snippet of another directory listing. And you can tell from this that it's not a full list. This list said there should be 70 files, yet we see only 6 files.
actually, I think it says 90.
90 files, and we see only 6.
Okay, so, but it's showing you DOS directory, and that is a valid thing that would show up on a screen.
Yes.
And that shows a creation or a last worked upon date, does it not?
Yes.
And that date is January 20th, 1986,
Yes.
and it has a time of 12:25 p.m.
Yes.
Okay, now the next thing here is something called X-tree, or the symbol for something called X-tree.
Right.
And is X-tree a type of program?
Xtree is a type of program, but if it were the program Xtree, it should say xtree.exe, not plain Xtree. Plain
Okay.
Xtree, again, is meaningless.
Okay, but nevertheless, it shows a number of characters, or
Right.
it shows that this X-tree, whatever it is, has data in it.
Yes.
In fact, it's got 22,445 bytes of data in it.
Right.
Okay. And this also has a date, and this date is March 25th, 88.
Yes, ma'am.
And it also has a time of 9:41 a.m.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, does that indicate that, let's assume hypothetically you load a program into a computer, and it's a computer that has an automatic clock.
Right.
Will that, when you then look at the directory on that computer, and it lists that program as one of the things in it, will it always show the date that that program was loaded?
No, it will not.
So what date will it show? The last time you worked that program?
No, if it's a program like Xtree, where it's a purchase program, it will show the last date that the publisher worked on the program before they shipped it. But again, those dates aren't always real. If you look at the current copy of Microsoft Windows, which is a program that didn't exist until 1993, there are several files in it that are dated 87 and 88. So it's, or just, I mean, those date stamps and time stamps, as often as not, are meaningless and irrelevant
In those programs?
in many store-bought programs.
Okay, let's get back to this, though. You think that this X-tree is not really a program, but what, a document?
No, it looks like a corrupted file. I mean, the Xtree is a program, but Xtree should be Xtree EXE or Xtree COM.
So
But
this
it's-
looks like it might be a file with the name X-tree.
Right.
And it's a file with,
With some size, 22,000 bytes, but it's not,
it's about 11 pages of material.
depends on what it is. If it's a text file, about 2,000 bytes per page, give or take.
Okay, the next line is the word, it appears to be guest, G-U-E-S-T.
It's also the name of a directory.
And that's a directory. And that shows a date of March 25th, 88, and a time of 9:43 a.m. Does that mean that's when that directory was created on this computer?
Most likely. I mean, looking at also the one that's almost more indicative is a DOS directory is generally one of the first things that you create when you set up a new machine. So if theoretically this were a piece of the directory from the main directory, and it had not been changed or modified or corrupted, it would imply that, and if they had set the date correctly when they first set the machine up, it would imply that this machine was first set up in 1988. Because you see both of these directories being created same date, roughly the same time.
Okay, but then we're about to hit a row of 3 things that all have dates of 1987 on them.
As I said, most of the dates are irrelevant. I mean, with an XT, it's very hard to get anything from the dates.
Okay, let's go on with this. Because what we do have now is entries that have different dates, not all, and then none of them are 1980, is that correct?
None of these are 1980.
All right, now let's go to the next entry. Under guest, which is a directory, we now have 3 files, Will, Menendez, and List. Is
Right.
that correct? Now, are they files under the guest directory?
No, they are not.
All right, so they're just separate files.
There are separate files in the main directory, or this snippet of the main directory.
Now, according to this printout, the Will file has 59 bytes or 59 characters.
Right,
The Menendez file has 59 bytes or characters.
right.
And the List file has 59 bytes or characters.
Yes, ma'am.
And all 3 of these files have the same date, January 13th, 1987.
Yes,
And all 3 of them appear to have been last worked upon or created, whichever it is, a minute apart. One at 4:58 a.m., one at 4:59 a.m., and one at 5 a.m.
right.
So does that appear to comport somewhat, at least with your memory, that you found individual files that had no significant information, but the identical information?
That's the way I recall it, yes.
And that's what that looks like, 3 files with identical information created at or near the same time.
Yes.
Now, 59 bytes, if you translate that, let's assume it's text. If you translate that into words, how many words would 59 bytes be?
7, 8. I mean, if you figure, an average of 8 characters per word, 10 words.
Okay. I have nothing further.
Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. You have yours, please.
Yes.
Mr. Witkin, you have in front of you an exhibit which is marked as Exhibit 70. Is there any way to tell from looking at this exhibit the date and time that it was actually prepared?
No, there's no way to tell.
Now, I believe you indicated that certain kinds of computers have built-in clocks and other types of computers, the older models, you have to tell the computer what time it is. Is that
Right.
correct?
And even those with built-in clocks, you can override the time with one command. You type date and tell it the date, and as far as it's concerned, it will be that date.
So I could go home and tell my computer tonight that it's 1972.
Right. And in fact, for accounting systems, you'll find people often do that. They will reset their accounting system to a prior quarter or to a prior month so that they can fool the computer into thinking it's one date so they can go back and enter things in the past and then reset it to a current date. So it's a very, very simple thing to do.
So if I wanted to, I could go home. Well, let me ask you this. Could I go home tonight if I had one of these printers that took this kind of paper and actually create this document?
Absolutely.
How long do you think it would take me? Well, not knowing as much as you do, but how long would it take to create something like that?
Your Honor, I'm going to object to how long it would take counsel, since how long it would take counsel is irrelevant.
Okay, how long would it take you, Mr. Witkin?
10 minutes, 5 minutes.
So you could recreate everything on this by telling the computer different times and dates and then inputting that into the computer and then printing it out.
Right.
Now, according to this document 70, there appears to be these 3 files and they have 59 bytes. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, is it correct also that when you work on a file, if you change the file, it will put a new time and date stamp on the file?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to go stand over here so you look at the jury.
Sorry.
And you indicated 59 bytes was anywhere from 8 to 10 words. If the file previously had contained, let's say, 20,000 bytes, and you went back and changed it to very few words, would there be any indication that the file previously had 20,000 bytes?
None at all.
Could you tell the jury briefly what bytes are?
Characters or letters. I mean, if I took a 20,000 word document and I just copied a directory over it, it would replace that document with the directory, and there would be no record that it had ever contained anything other than that directory. You'd write right over the top of it. It would have a new time stamp, a new date. It would have a new file size, and the information that had previously been held in that file, each individual letter, the letters would be written over and gone.
So I could go to my computer tonight and take 3 files, tell the computer that it's 1987, and write over each of those 3 files the identical 59 bytes. Is
Right.
that
And in
correct?
fact, if you wanted to erase the file and erase it in a way that's non-recoverable, the best way to do so isn't to tell it to delete the file, but to write something else over the top of it.
Would you need to write over all 20,000 characters, or could you just write a few characters?
If you didn't write over all 20,000, the characters could still exist on the disk. They wouldn't be associated with any file. They would just be sitting on the disk. But the next file, the way DOS allocates new memories, the next time you created a file, it would go right over the top of whatever space you had just freed up. Generally, as you free up space, that will be the next space used. So if I had a 20,000 byte file, copied a 59 byte file over it, it would erase the first 512, don't ask me why, but it would create the first block and leave the rest of the data there. But every other file that you wrote would go right over the top of whatever other data was sitting out on the disk.
And thereby erase it.
So it's one of the best ways to eliminate the information.
Now, you use the term corrupted file. Could you tell us what that means?
A corrupted file, a computer isn't perfect. The way it stores information is it takes, there's a metal platter, a hard disk is a metal platter coated with kind of a rubberized magnetic film. And the way it stores information is it just magnetizes it. It magnetizes the film one direction or the other. So you can get something called a hard disk crash. You can destroy data or damage a computer. If you drop the computer, you bang into the computer. There's numerous things that will force it to scratch the electronic media. You can put a magnet next to it. There's numerous things that will allow it to change the information kind of in an inconsistent fashion, and you'll end up with a file that no longer is a meaningful file. It may still have the name, it may still be on the directory, but the information that it used to contain is no longer of any validity.
And that's what you mean by corrupted.
And that's what I mean by corrupted.
Lastly, the exhibit in front of you, number 70, did you create that exhibit?
No, I did not.
Do you have any knowledge personal as to where it came from?
I've actually I saw it here today, and I've seen a previous copy that was sent to me by a private investigator working for one of the defense counsels.
But as far as your personal knowledge of where that came from, you have no idea. Is that correct?
No, ma'am.
Thank you.
Any further cross?
Yes, Your
Mr. Witkin, your understanding of computers is on the high end of sophisticated, is it not?
I hope so.
In looking at Exhibit 70 and that the first entry on it, you said that was a totally meaningless set of commands, correct?
On 70, the first command is C:(Menendez. So theoretically, they could have named a program Menendez, but it's
You said that was an ineffectual
right.
command.
I'm assuming that's an ineffective. Right, typing it is basically meaningless unless they've created a program called Menendez. It's meaningless. But seeing what it's producing immediately thereafter, it's pretty much meaningless.
Okay, but my point is it does not look like a person with your level of computer sophistication
Created this document.
Created that document,
No,
correct?
ma'am. Exactly. I mean, just looking also, if you look at the continuation, where there are another half a dozen attempts at issuing it as a command.
When you say the continuation, there's more written on that sheet.
There's more written on
than
this
what-
page than the directory.
You've got to wait for the question.
Yes,
sorry.
let him finish the answer before you ask your next question.
Oops,
Did you finish your answer?
Yes, sir.
My question was, there's more material on that printout than those files that I took you through a little while ago.
Yes, ma'am, there is.
All right, and below those files, there seems to be a series of attempts by someone who is not as sophisticated as you to call up some files from the computer,
Yes, ma'am.
correct? And they're not doing it right.
No, ma'am, they're not.
So that does not exhibit, does it, to you, a high level of understanding of how this computer works?
No, ma'am. There is one just in the
All right,
way.
you've answered the question.
Sorry.
Now, you say that there's this method to write over and on top of a file. Does that come in the DOS book that you get for a computer? Does it tell you how to do that?
I'm not sure.
Is that something that your word processing program book will tell you?
Your word processing book will definitely tell you, because it'll tell you how to avoid doing so that you don't damage your documents.
So this is something that people stumbling around can sometimes do and damage their documents, or something someone very sophisticated can do to hide a file. that
Definitely
correct?
possible, yes.
Now let's take someone very sophisticated like yourself. If someone had made an effort to write over a 20,000 byte file with a 59 byte file, what you're saying is you wouldn't be able to find that previous 20,000 bytes as a file, but they're still on that disk, aren't they?
Possibly.
And there are utility programs and tools that you could use to try to find that data.
Which is what I did.
And
Yes.
you didn't find it, did you?
No, ma'am, I did not.
Nothing further.
I have one question.
Yes.
Mr. Witkin, on Exhibit 70, there are, the three files that you made reference to are 1 minute apart.
Yes, ma'am.
What does that signify to me, please?
A conscious effort to write over that it was not a corrupted file that produced those small files. That whatever data those files had contained, they do not contain this data through corruption. That it was a conscious effort to copy whatever information is in them into them.
Nothing further.
When you say a conscious effort to copy whatever information is in them to them, what did you mean?
Good question.
What did that mean?
You can look at a file that's damaged for whatever reason, and try to decide whether that file, whether the file is damaged through just the disk itself failing, through a fluke of something, one of the things just happened on the computer, or whether it took active intervention, whether it was purposeful intervention or accidental intervention. You couldn't create these files in this format without a person consciously intervening to create those files. Whether he knew that's what he was doing or not, I can't say, but it takes a conscious effort to create these three files, same size, same data, one right after the other.
And you indicated that there was a date for all of these and they were 1 minute apart, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And I'm referring now to when you looked at the computer screen, not the exhibit before you.
That I don't recall. I'm sorry.
All right. Do you recall what the time frame was regarding those 4 files? You had indicated.
I remember when I saw them, I remember it striking me that they were basically identical times, but whether they were all 1 minute apart or 2 minutes apart, I remember it struck me at that time that they were done sequentially, but I don't remember now the exact time sequence.
Was there any indication as to the date they were done?
I don't remember what that date would have been. I don't recall.
Was there some reason why you didn't pay attention to the date that these events occurred, or as they were reflected on the screen anyway?
Because as I said, as a general rule on an XT, date stamps are meaningless. Only because it doesn't hold the date, because every time you turn it on, you have to type in a date. They're generally random. They're generally not meaningful on an XT. So
Right.
for the most part, you just ignore them.
Is that what you did?
Just ignore them.
All right. Anything else?
Just to clarify the court's question, if I can ask from here, Your Honor, I just want to see if I understand your answer to the judge's question. When you say conscious, it means a person had to hit some keys on the computer. Whether they knew what they were doing or didn't know what they were doing, they had to hit the keys on the computer to create files that look like this.
Right.
As compared to lightning strikes the building and your computer blows out and that destroys the
Exactly.
file. Thank you. Now for clear.
All right. Anything else?
No, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. You may step down. You're excused.
Thank you, sir.
All right. And we'll now resume testimony. Are you ready with the next witness?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, and it'll just take a moment, ladies and gentlemen. We'll get organized and have everybody present, including the other jury. So as soon as all counsel can get organized here, we'll resume with both juries and the next witness. Yes. It'll be just a brief moment here when we get the other jury in and both defendants and counsel organized.
Both defendants.
All right, we have both juries back in the courtroom and we're ready to resume with the next witness.
Okay, hang on.
As far as the Lyle Menendez jury, I know it took a little longer, but unfortunately we had a situation where we got a little late start after our recess when we excused you. And it took us a little longer to finish off what we had to do, but we're now ready.
Okay, so I'm actually going to be cutting it off here because I will be saving this for the next one. This one actually appears to be a different witness. I think Care Bear earlier mentioned that the next witness is the woman that sold the Rolexes and gold money clips to the brothers shortly after the killings. I guess we only get audio of her testimony. That makes sense because when I was scrolling through, I saw like rainbow bars on the screen. So I was kind of like quickly kind of airdropping through the testimony. And so I assumed that was just like lunch break or something, as we often see those kind of rainbow bars. But perhaps that is going to be the audio testimony there. I thought that the next witness was going to be Dr. Irwin Golden, the deputy medical examiner, but it seems like that is going to be a different witness here now. So I'm going to pause it there, and we're going to end the stream here. And on the next episode, we will be getting into the next witness. But before we go, Andy, thank you so much for another jokester super chat from my big brother. Everybody thinks that he's my younger brother, but that's just because we have a different maturity level. Andy, the game maker, says this begs the question: if they find any files intact and that haven't been corrupted, can they be presented in court as, I don't know, legal bites? You're funny. Thanks, brother. I appreciate that. Very good dad humor. Okay. Anyway, thanks so much, Andy. I don't know that I can answer that question. But all right. So thank you to everyone for joining me on this one. This has been, I know it's some parts of the testimony I think it's really interesting. Other parts, they get really dry, especially when we're talking about some of the more technical sides of this trial, going through talking about how a hard drive gets rewritten. For me, it's interesting to see that kind of testimony because that's not exactly in my personal wheelhouse. So that's yeah, very, very interesting. But at the same time, it can, as they kind of get more and more into the weeds, it's a little bit, I don't know. Like I said, it can get a little dry for some folks. So, alrighty. Once again, thank you so much to everybody. And thank you again to Sandra Ramirez for gifting all those memberships. And thank you also to, oh my gosh, I forgot the name of the account for also becoming a YouTube member. That was, let's see if I can find it. Perceptions of Reality. Thank you so much also once again for becoming a member of Bite Club. I will see you guys in the next video, right? Because we've got Christmas coming up. Oh, well, of course, in a bit, we're gonna be right back here, right? Because we're gonna be talking about the Amber Heard Johnny Depp settlement, right? We've got to talk about it. We spent how long on this channel talking about that trial, going over every single detail in that trial. And now it seems like there has been a sudden and abrupt ending to it. So we are going to talk about it. I might have some friends on with me as well to sort of like, I don't know, maybe we can bring back some of the gang to talk about this, because this is a major moment for all of us, right? This is a bit of a cultural flashpoint. So to have a sudden end to the appeals process, it feels almost unceremonious, right? So anyway, okay. Well, next Menendez live stream is not going to be next Monday, but the following Monday. So, but otherwise, I'll be posting on social media for all of the things, all the YouTubey things. Anyway, yeah, I think that for me about does it. I'll see you guys in the next video.